you got to do it 1,000 times in your head before you can teach it to somebody else. So, I think that ultimately made me a better wrestler, a better competitor, because I had to slow down, take the time to teach it, put myself in a good position, and then teach another good position out of it. And so I think that if I was to give a piece of advice to any coach or anybody that planned on coaching or any kids coming up, take time to teach those younger kids, because the person that teaches that position is doing it so many times in their head. I still catch myself.
Go hard. Yeah, these championship rings on my hands now. In my head I'm top 10, yeah, that's hands down. You a squad, now you're looking man down. Funny how foes turn to friends now. Drive a race car like a Atari now. Call filling up, I need product again. Treat the business like a playground, might slide on you. Do me wrong, might slide on you.
All right, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Ricky Cheese. I am your guest host on the North Florida Wrestling Show. It's a great podcast here. I'm really happy and excited that I'm able to have the opportunity to do this. And we've got a really special guest tonight. He is a two-time state champ from Suwannee. Was there from 2007 to 2010. His family is wrestling royalty. We've got Travis Laxton from Live Oak. Thank you for coming on the show tonight with us.
Yeah, no problem. I don't know about wrestling royalty, more like wrestling infamy, maybe, but
no, man,
we're close.
The Laxton last name's got some clout behind it in the wrestling world. Trust me, it does, man.
Well, we appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Absolutely, of course. So what's going on tonight, man? You had a good day at work?
Pretty easy day at work. I've got 2 kids now, so it's Katie bar the door. From the time 6 a.m. hits, we're sprinting, sprint. Yeah. So
what are the ages?
My son Archer Laxton, he is almost 2, so he's right around like 20 months or so. And then my daughter Arlington, she is 5 months next week. So we're young, we're starting out. My wife Jessica, she does a great job with them. Couldn't ask for a better partner when raising some kids. So, honestly, she takes the brunt of it. She's working from home, staying at home, and I get to get out of the house and go to school every day. So
bro, that's a tougher job than what we have.
Absolutely.
That's a real job, man.
She wears many hats, man, and she wears them well. So I'm just happy for her support system. She keeps me pretty level.
I love hearing it. Congratulations. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So are you coaching now?
I am. I'm actually the head wrestling coach at South Walton High School. I've been here since 2017, 2018 season, I want to say. 2016, 2017, that's right. I was at Niceville High School. Mm-hmm. Produced a state champ there, Jack Johnson, and 4 other qualifiers, which was awesome.
Cool.
I loved that group of kids. They were a pretty good core group of kids. And then wound up finding a solid teaching job over here at Emerald Coast Middle School.
Nice.
Which is, maybe 5 miles from the high school. It's not bad at all. So I'll get off work there and we'll head to the wrestling room, and been coaching there, I guess, 7-8 years now. So started out, Coach Kerry Nick, give him a quick shout out. He's the one that actually kind of pulled me over, him and a guy by the name of Chris Pickren.
Yeah.
A lot of history there. I love Chris to death. I actually lived with Chris for probably 3 or 4 years.
Wow.
Over the summers, I was coming here and helping coach that Back in Black team with Brock Carolyn and Richie McClanahan, the Pickren boys.
My son Bryce wrestled McClanahan at Somerset. It was a good tournament. And then my son also used to wrestle. Bryce used to wrestle a bunch of times against William Pickren. They had some good matches back and forth.
Oh yeah,
and that's how I got Chris. He was a really good guy. It's really unfortunate that he's no longer with us, but very sad story, man.
Yeah. When it all came about, I've never met a man with a better attitude or a better outlook on life, and he just didn't want to, burden everybody with his woes. He was always the motivational guy in the room, and that's what made you love him. So
absolutely.
That's exactly why I love
Yeah.
it.
And you know what? When you hear things like that, it kind of makes you feel guilty because, we all walk around at times and bitching and moaning about, oh my God, I got to do this, I got to do that. Man, you don't have problems, man. If I heard a saying once, and it's so true, if you could throw all your problems in the center of the room and everybody in that room would throw their problems in the center of the room, there's a 99% chance you'd take your own problems back.
Oh
Because
yeah,
people have worse
absolutely.
than what you think you have, and it's just all relative, man.
I tell my kids all the time, my kids and my wrestling kids, I guess they're
Yeah,
all my kids, but I tell my kids all the time, there's no such thing as a bad day.
right.
And people are like, what are you talking about? I have bad days all the time. I'm like, no, there's really no such thing as a bad day. There are only good days and great days. The only reason that you know the difference in between the two is that one is better than the other.
Yeah,
So sometimes you're the man stepping on the stone, and sometimes you're the stone. You just got to take them and keep rolling.
absolutely. So, how's the team looking for the 2024-2025 season?
I think we're looking pretty good. I've got a lot of kids coming back. We drew no seniors last year, so we had no seniors last year. We took one kid that placed fourth. Probably should have took 4 or 5, but you know how that goes.
Who was the fourth placer?
Gibson Moore.
Yeah,
He
I
wound
had
up
him right.
losing. Yeah, he wound up losing to the Cardinal Gibbons kid. I think it was like 3-1, and then lost in that console semis match to Benny Lewis from Baker
Mm-hmm.
County, two to
Baker, yeah,
one. So it was such a tight match, man. I
yeah,
love watching those kids wrestle, but it was really good. Anyways, he's signed up. He's going to camps. We've got him signed up for nationals and things of that nature. So he's on a good tip. His wrestling partner, Caden Shaw, we're looking for big things out of him. He's looking really, really sharp right now. Typically I don't do any wrestling for 3 weeks after the state tournament.
yeah,
It gives everybody a mental reset.
for sure.
Then we can come back and have a little more fun with it. Off-season wrestling's a little more fun than
Yeah,
in-season wrestling. So
yeah,
that's kind
yeah.
of what we do to reset around here.
Nice. So let me get back to you when you were wrestling. So 2007 to 2010, you're a two-time state champ, but you were also a four-time medalist, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So in 2007, I came in and had to actually beat a state runner-up just to make the varsity lineup. Obviously, it was 103 at the time, so he came in, and I wound up pinning him in our wrestle-off somewhere in the third period. He wrestled 112 that year. I think he wound up placing fifth. We both go to the state tournament, and I lose a really tight barn burner to a name that's very familiar, Clark Glass.
Oh yeah.
So in the semifinals, a phenomenal guy, phenomenal wrestler. So that match was super tight, tied 3-3 going in the third period. I cut him and lost a scramble, lost 6-3. It was tight. It was a good match, man. I enjoy wrestling kids like that, and wrestled a lot of those kids. Throughout my tenure there. You got Clark Glass, Tyler Liebetor,
Mm-hmm.
I would say Cody Singletary.
Yeah.
Um,
But those are the
rest
matches that made you what you are,
those
right?
Yeah, those are the matches that you wanted to see. Kids like
Totally.
Blaine Eisen and Brandon George wrestled both of those guys. And
Totally.
sometimes I say, you heard me say, sometimes you're the man stepping on the stone, and sometimes you're the stone. For the
Yeah.
first 2 years I was there, I think I was the stone.
Yeah.
you know, I was getting
But
stepped on, and
yeah, we
then
got
I
you
got to
tough.
come back and wrestle those kids again and see him again. And so, yeah, I placed third my freshman year and third my sophomore year, lost again in the semis. We call it the semis curse. Scotty Bouthiller from Lemonberry. He was a 3-time finalist, 1-time
I
champ,
remember
I
him
think.
too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So I mean, those lower weights in 1A back in the day were just tough, man. Tough. Those were some tough kids. Most of those kids, wound up being 4 and 5-time state champs,
Oh
3-time
yeah.
state champs. It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. Those are all the kids that they were wrestling in seventh and eighth grade. I mean, a lot of them were, ninth grade age because they were held back, but they were
Yeah.
still, eighth, but whatever, man. They all started like 4 or 5 years old and grew up through that Brandon program or, Powder Meadow Ridge,
Oh
wherever
yeah.
it was.
Oh
And
yeah.
they were just hammers, man. Every single one of them, man. You had to be a stud to compete with those dudes.
Absolutely, absolutely. And like that whole era of wrestling, I think You know, it just pulled so many good wrestlers that late 2000s era. It was awesome to see some of those kids coming out and competing. I got in my junior year, we used to go to the Durant Invitational, the Cougar Invitational.
Yeah.
That was our opening tournament every year. And you know, scout.com, people were talking trash about who would win out of myself and Earl Hall. And I was up a weight. I was at 112, so I wound up cutting down to 103 for that tournament specifically.
Yeah, I
And wound
remember
up,
that. I remember
yeah,
that thread, actually. I do. I fucking remember that. Holy cow.
yeah, it was crazy. Dude, I was getting trashed like left and right. People were like, "Oh, it'll never happen. Laxton can't make it past the semis, this, that, and the third." And oh man, my dad, you know, we had one computer in the house at the time, you know,
Yeah.
back in the day, and it was set up in the living room, and I'm like, "Dad, are you reading this? Are you reading this?" He's like, "Cut the weight," and I was like, "I'm cutting the weight." So we
That's
decided to
awesome.
cut the weight, which was miserable, by the way, because I was not a small 103 pounder by any means.
No, you aren't. I remember.
And wound up wrestling.
Back then it was 103. People don't realize that. It ain't 106.
Yeah,
Three
it
back
wasn't
then.
106. It was 103. And
What would you have done for those 3 pounds, man? Holy shit.
anything.
It
I'd
made
have
a
gave my
world.
left arm.
Exactly. Had to make 103.
Had to make 103. But yeah, we wound up. I actually wound up wrestling another eventual 3-timer my junior year, Richie Bliss in the semis, and beat him. Yep, beat him, and then got to see Earl in the finals and wound up beating Earl 5-4. So that was. I mean, as far as memories go, that's probably one of my favorite tournaments. Sometimes I feel like kids these days would rather take a forfeit than wrestle the competition, and I love to compete. So it was about who's the best kid that I can find that I can measure up. You know, like I want to go and see those kids, so I want to know where I'm at and how much I got to work to get better, and what level I'm on. And so that was kind of the mentality throughout the high school career was, where are the best guys? Let's go see them. Let's go wrestle them.
Yeah, it's so funny
I like
you say
that.
that because I was thinking about that earlier. You know, not to trash any of the wrestlers today because we got some really tough kids,
Absolutely.
physically and mentally. But it just seems that back in the years that you were wrestling, Jordan was wrestling, my sons were wrestling, it was just a little different. I don't know if it's just me or if it really was, because back then my kids, just like you, they were like, get me to the toughest tournaments, man. I want to wrestle this kid. He's nationally. I want that one.
It's kind of like two philosophies. Do you want to be the best because you beat the best, or do you, as a coach, want to put your kid in the best position so that he can win a state title? You know, it's kind of two philosophies, and sometimes I'm torn on it because as a coach versus as a competitor, I'm looking for strategy to get my kid to the show. How do I get my kid to the show? And how do I, what's the best opportunity for him to be successful?
Mm-hmm.
That's my mindset now. Then as a competitor, I was, hey, stick me in front of that kid. And if I lose, so be it. But if I don't, I'll know at least how much harder I need to work. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. As a competitor. And I guess that's kind of the split in between coaching now and competing then. So,
yep. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. I was talking with David Mercado from North Bay Haven, and he won his state title at 220, but he was like 30 pounds under that. I'm like, why did you go 220? He goes, Coach Turnipseed thought that was going to be my best route to win a state title. And I'm like, I was thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? Would I have done that if I was a coach? And I think I would have. I'm going to put the kid in the best position. And that's exactly what happened. I guess Zane looked at the bracket and he said, listen, he's got Michael Mako to go through, or he's got this kid to go through. I think we're going to take the other kid all day long. So, he gave up 30 pounds and the kid won a damn state title. So good for him. So I think I probably would have done the same thing. Now that we're speaking about the whole mental aspect of it, how much do you preach mental attitude to your kids that wrestle for you right now?
I was asked this question a few weeks ago. He said, when you were coaching, what do you coach first? Do you coach the attitude or do you coach the technique? Well, the whole philosophy behind wrestling is that anybody, BODY, can wrestle. Anybody can wrestle.
Yep.
Okay. but not everybody is built mentally tough.
Right.
Okay, so if anything, one, you have to have a positive outlook. You got to be a glass half full kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, you're never going to make it. Your failures will kill you every single time. So essentially, I'm coaching attitude. Hey man, you show up on time. You're putting in the effort. You got a great attitude. I can make a champion out of that kid all day long versus a kid that doesn't want to be there, that is just slacking in practice. It's attitude over everything else. And if you have the attitude of a champion, then you're going to put in the effort to be a champion.
Yeah.
And then you become coachable, you start learning faster, you start learning more, you start drilling better, and things start to fall into place. It's kind of like that old saying, look good, feel good, wrestle good. It's all about your attitude. If I look good, I'm going to feel good. If I feel good, my mental game is strong. And if my mental game is strong, I'm going to wrestle well. That's it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Look good, feel good, wrestle good. So I'm coaching the attitude first. Hey, man. And, I think it starts at a young age because everybody knows wrestling is the most grueling sport that you could be a part of by far, by any stretch of the imagination. Wrestling is going to be the most grueling sport that you could participate in by far. However, if you start a kid at a young age and this kid has to constantly battle adversity and he goes, okay, well, I did that. That wasn't so hard. Okay, now I did this. That wasn't that hard. And you start scaling it back. Even if they fail, they're failing forward, moving forward, moving toward a goal, and eventually getting there. That attitude is going to get so much better over time. And they're just going to be like, oh, this is just another bump in the road. Here we go. I'm going to take it on and I'm going to meet it head on. And then I'm going to get, once I overcome this adversity, it's on to the next challenge and the next challenge. And I think that's why wrestlers are so mentally tough, is because they want to see, I want to meet that adversity head on. I know that I can conquer this because I've done all of this already. I've done this already. So I'm going to conquer this step and then this step and then this step. I will coach the attitude first all day long, because if that kid has a good attitude, I can teach him anything.
Absolutely. And I don't think there's a better coach out there right now to teach mental attitude than you. And I mean that because I recall you were called out, you received the Russ Mauger Mental Attitude Award before the state finals, didn't you?
I did. Actually, that was probably one of the greatest honors that I could have had. He was just always a stand-up guy, of the highest integrity. And so that's why the award was named after him. But just to be able to implement some of that in my wrestling and some of that off the mat, just in the tournaments, man, like I was always told, listen, if somebody steps in that circle with you, they're fair game. But off the mat, you are to be a respectful young adult. Like, you conduct yourself, humble yourself, and you take a win like a loss. So I don't ever recall celebrating a match or a big match until the state finals. Like I honestly, I don't ever recall that. And then after I won my first state title, which was probably my favorite one, because that's when all your dreams are actually realized.
Right.
When you win that first one, that's the most memorable one to me.
Of course.
I mean, other state champs or even 4-time state champs, they have that goal, which I had that goal. But, after heartbreak, freshman year, heartbreak sophomore year, to come back and win it and watch all of those dreams be realized, that was probably the most rewarding moment after that. And right before the finals, receiving that award is probably one of the most memorable moments of my life.
Yeah.
I loved it.
Awesome. Yeah. I actually do remember that. And every state tournament I go to now, I always make sure that I pay special attention when they're giving that award, because it's just so awesome. And to see the kid and think, what that kid went through to actually receive that award, it's just a cool thing. I enjoyed it a lot. Now, when you were wrestling at Suwannee, your dad was the head coach there?
Yes, he was. So my dad coached, started in 1981, coached all the way up until, I want to say, like the early 2000s, 2000, 2001. Went to Columbia High School for about 4 or 5 years. Came back in 2006. My brother was a sophomore or junior. So he's probably a junior in 2006. Came back in 2006 and coached all the way up again until 2017, something like that. So a good majority of his, coaching career was at Suwannee. It was 30 plus years or so.
Yeah, he was at Suwannee when I was wrestling in high school. I remember that because I don't know if he was good friends, but he was friends with my head coach Randy Miller, who was a phenomenal wrestler, like world level. I think he
Oh
was
yeah.
on a world team or two. But in 1982 or 83, maybe it was 84, my sophomore year, we were at tournaments that you guys were at, and that's when I first started seeing your dad coach. And your dad, forget about the coaching, but as an athlete, as a wrestler, he was a badass. I mean, he was a state runner-up in the state of Alabama the year I was born. Not to age your dad, sorry, coach, but in 1968, your dad was a state runner-up.
And you know what's funny is that was the only year of high school he ever wrestled.
Come on,
Nope,
that's crazy.
It's the only year of high school he ever wrestled. As a matter of fact, he worked his freshman, sophomore, and junior year. My grandfather was a roughneck
Holy
welder.
shit, that makes it
Yeah,
that much more impressive.
yeah. So and then after that, he had went to Troy State, which was and wrestled 2 years there, and then they dropped the program and he transferred to Auburn, and so he wrestled at Auburn at the same time
Cozart
that Cozart was at Alabama. Yeah. My dad was a 118, 125 pounder. So
that's crazy, man. What history?
1 year in high school.
What history. So your dad started for your family, and then now your brother Lee, he's older, right?
Yes, my brother Lee is 35 now. I'm 33. My sister's in between us. Not a lot of people know about her, but my sister's probably the best athlete of all of us.
It's like my kids. I have 3 boys and a girl. My daughter Taylor. They're like, "Who?" I'm like, "It's my daughter. I have a daughter."
Oh yeah.
The poor kid. We would drag her to every tournament, and then it became we didn't have to drag her. She actually loved being there for her brothers. But so Lee was a 2-time runner-up. He didn't win it, right?
2-time runner-up, 1-time third place, or 4-time qualifier.
Wow. So he was a tough son of a bitch too, man.
Oh yeah, trust me, I know. Got beat on a lot.
What's that?
I said, trust me, I know. I got beat on a lot.
No, I'm sure. They always say the youngest is usually always the best, and the reason for this is because they take all the ass whoopings.
Yeah, absolutely. I learned how to take ass whoopings at a young age. Well, it didn't help either that my brother's always bigger than me, so he's a big guy. My freshman year, I was at 103, and he was a senior on that same 2007 team. The year he graduated, and he wrestled 189 pounds.
Oh wow!
So that's a big difference.
So after high school, you did go to college and wrestle. You started at Newberry, but you transferred and you went to Coker, correct?
Yeah, I actually graduated from Newberry.
You did?
Yes, I did. So I wrestled 4 years at Newberry, had an extra year of eligibility. So I transferred to Coker to get my master's degree and wrestle with Cy Wainwright.
I was just going to ask if Wainwright was there at the time.
Yes, he was. And
connection.
It was really funny situation because I wound up graduating right there over the summer. I think I needed one class, and the class I needed was pottery. And I took it over the summer. So I didn't walk at Newberry at all. I talked to my advisor, and I came in and I was a bio major, and I was going to either go into the nursing program or go into physical therapy like my sister, and wound up changing my senior year to psychology. And they were like, "Hey, we don't know what classes you're going to take because you have everything you need except for an elective credit. It's like a 1-hour credit."
Yeah.
And then so for 2 weeks I took pottery and dressed all these things up, and after the class was done, they handed me my diploma, and I moved right over to Hartsville, South Carolina, and started training again for the upcoming season, and wound up actually in that 2015, I guess it was 2014. Yeah, 2014, 2015, right there. I guess whatever that season was, wound up qualifying for D2 NCAAs.
Nice.
And it was actually really cool. I lost in the blood round in ride out, so that was not cool. But it was about 30 seconds away from an All-American status.
Wow. Were you a 25 pounder or 33?
I was a 25.
Okay.
So if you look at the stats on Newberry's board, I bounced back and forth in between 25 and 33. We had a lot of really good 25 pounders there, transferring from Lehigh, JUCO national champs. So it was tough to crack that lineup, and I wrestled here and there. I think I lettered twice, and then when I wound up transferring, I actually in the in the semifinals of the qualifier wound up beating one of my former teammates, Trong Dong,
Oh
who
wow.
wound up being a 2 or 3 time All-American.
Yeah.
So yeah. So to qualify, I don't think he qualified that year. That put me into the finals with a kid from UIndy, and lost to him 3 or 4 to nothing, 4 to nothing. So it wasn't, I had a good career, man. I can't knock it. I enjoyed my time. Are there things I could have done better? Yeah, absolutely. I think if you ask any wrestler or competitor, they're going to tell you the same thing. Yeah, I probably should have done this or that.
Yeah.
But you can't go back, man. You just learn from those, and you keep moving forward. And that's after that, I got into coaching, and I love wrestling. It's done so much for me. I just wanted to give back some.
Absolutely. So I'm going to kind of put you on the spot now, going back to high school. If you could name one match, if you were able to take one match back and wrestle it again, what match would that be and why?
I got 7 matches that I would like to take back.
Good shit.
In my high school career, I was 151-7, and I could name more of my losses than I could my wins.
Yeah.
I split matches with Blaine Eisen. I split matches with Tyler Libertor. I split matches with, let's see, who was the other one? I wrestled. So just to tell you, that freshman year bracket, that was I lost to Clark Glass in the semis, wrestled Tyler Libertor immediately after that, and to place third had to beat Pete Baldwin. It really was, man. And then, it's funny because I wound up wrestling Fox my senior year in the finals. Honestly, I would say that Clark Glass match. If I had to go back and take one back, I would say that match. I think that I would have came in with a different mentality my sophomore year. If I could take that one back, that would probably be it. I think that would have, instead of being the stone, I would have been the stepper. So,
Right.
you know what I mean? It's just one of those things where I think that if I'd have won that match, I probably would have been Suwannee's first 4-timer,
Yeah.
which was the goal when I started anyway.
Of course.
And I don't know if you know the story of Billy Saylor, but he, at the time he held.
He's a
When I
3-time.
was coming through. Yeah, he's a 3-timer. So he
1990,
held.
I think he graduated 90.
No, 96.
Oh, 96.
96. I think he was on that 1996 state championship
I
team.
have it written down. He was in the 90s. But
Yep,
yeah.
in the 90s. Yep.
Okay.
So he was at 96, and he was a heavyweight kid, 89, 215, 215.
What's
and
the
then,
story on that?
well, I was a young kid when he was there. I was only 5 when Billy was there. And then so I can even remember going to Billy's funeral. So, he was always the one that would stop and play with my brother and I. He'd be over there and they'd be working, and in the water breaks, walking by, he'd like kind of, mess around with you a little bit. He always made time for us, which was really cool.
He passed away.
So when they implemented the weight certification programs. So that year, he went to Campbell after he graduated, and that year he passed away on a stationary bike. Him and 2 other kids that year.
I didn't realize
he was
it
the
was
one.
Billy.
Yeah. So
Holy shit, I remember that.
when I was coming up, I was like, what a great way to, honor him. Is I'm sure because he would always tell us, oh, you guys are going to be great. You guys are going to be great. You guys are going to be great. And so I wanted to do that. I wanted to be the one to beat his pin record and beat his, this record and that record, and be the first 4-timer so that I could beat that. I wanted to do those things. And so it was kind of important. And if I could take that first semifinals match back, I think it would have been so different.
Yeah.
But, I don't like to speculate on the past, woulda, coulda, shoulda, but it happened.
Yeah.
God wanted it to happen. And I'm sure that somewhere along the lines that he had a plan, and his plan is more important than mine.
For sure.
But I got to eventually beat all of those records. I, for the longest time, held the takedown record at Suwannee High School. I had 254 takedowns in a season, 39 pins in a season, or 36 pins in a season, something like that. We didn't wrestle, but about 40 matches a season when I was coming through. Nowadays 70 matches. I think Austin McKinney beat my pin record last year. He had like 56 pins. It was unreal. And I'm not sure if Eli Jolliker was on track to beat the takedown record this year, but I'll have to double check with John Wainwright about that. He was getting close. He was getting really.
Do you find yourself going to your dad for any advice? Do you guys talk about things like that, or you pretty much kind of just
all the time. The time. Listen, even in my dad's old age, he is extremely sharp when it comes to wrestling.
Yeah.
Extremely sharp. 5 times the coach that I could ever be. And I would even say that my brother Lee has that same sharpness. Lee coached for a year at Suwannee, and the year that he was there, he had 7 state qualifiers. So it's, they have that mental capacity. My dad is a planner and a prepper and a chess match man.
Mm-hmm.
I am a goer and a doer, and this is my system and this is what I know. So sometimes that hinders me, but at the same time, I'll go to my dad, hey, listen, I got this issue. Can we talk about it? And he's like, well, yeah, sure. We'll discuss it. He'll lay out options and he'll present these options to me. And I'll be like, well, I think that this would be the correct, whatever. And he'll ask me, why do you think that? And I'm like, well, I'm looking at all of the, stats and all of this and all of that. We try to bring it all together. And he goes, I'm glad you came to that conclusion. That's what I would have picked. And I'm like, okay, all right. So I'm on the right track. It just takes me a little longer to get there.
Yeah.
So sometimes, when you sit next to people like that and those that have that sharp wrestling mind, it's sometimes it can be a little intimidating, especially when it comes from your dad and he looks at you like, hey, should know that, man. Like, what are you talking about? You should have this down already. And it's just, I don't know if it's like I need him to reaffirm it to make sure I'm on the right track, or if it's I really need the advice, because eventually we do come to the same conclusion. It's just I think like I'm a half a second behind him.
Yeah.
And so I go to him a lot. Now, most of the time these days, if I ask him a question, he's more inclined to talk about fishing and hunting than he would anything else.
Good for him.
So we try to keep it light.
No.
Even when I was in high school, we didn't talk about wrestling at home. I didn't watch film. Yeah, I was a kid that couldn't watch film.
Wow.
I would not watch film.
Why?
So I work a lot better when I don't know who I'm wrestling. I would much rather weigh in, go eat a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit, step on the wrestling mat, and just wrestle.
That was my son's
advice. You can tell me who I beat afterwards. Like, I don't care. But if I start prepping and planning, now I'm wrestling that kid's game in my head. Like, in my head, I'm like, I'm wrestling his game and not my game. And that's not what I'm good at.
Yeah.
So he would be like, hey, do you want to look at this film? And no, I don't. I don't want to look at the film. Like,
it's so much like you.
It was funny because he would implement the plan anyway. It would just be in practice, and he would just never say anything. So it made it easy. Hey man, try this out. Bang, bang, bang. And then we would hit it 1,000 times, and he would tell you first 1,000 times doesn't count. So we'd hit it 1,000 times, and then it would just become muscle memory, and we would wrestle from there, and it worked. That's so. I guess in his mind, he's like, you got to know your wrestlers and how they're gonna react to certain situations. So, like again, he's sharp as a tack.
That's
I
awesome.
can only hope to be that sharp when I'm old as dirt too. So,
yeah. For calling him old as dirt. I wore the shirt just to show your dad that.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Repping Suwannee, man. They were nice enough to sent me this shirt. So when you were back in high school at Suwannee, who is the one guy in the wrestling that pushed you the hardest, that like you had to wrestle your ass off to stay with them, and the guy that you drilled with that made you better? Who was that? If you had one guy in all your years, who was your best drilling partner?
So I when it came to live goes, Jordan would probably be the one. Jordan Cohn would probably be the one that we butted heads the most. His style conflicted with mine so much, and it was unreal. Like he was more of a mat wrestler. I'm better on my feet. Like we did not. We clashed in so many ways. I'd take him down and he'd reverse me. Like it and like he'll tell you if you ever get a chance to talk to him that fist fights would break out. Like
Oh yeah.
we were that competitive. But typically, I would not drill with the same kids that I would live go with. And I say that kind of lightly because, we're all around the same weight. But I would typically drill with, like, say, my freshman year, I would drill with Merritt Burris or Caleb Sanders or Michael Burris. When that crop of freshmen came in behind me, I drilled with kids like Josh Key, who was an eventual state placer. And his younger brother, was a state runner-up for Suwannee. Or Aaron Fountain. And I drilled with Aaron from the time that he was a freshman. I drilled with Aaron Fountain all the way until I graduated. And once I graduated, Aaron kind of ran the room after that.
Yeah.
So there were times where Dad would stick me with these other kids to teach them more than anything. Now, in my mind, I'm over there and I'm like, I'm going to beat on you. But at least they learned good position.
Right.
So they were learning position and I was coaching and teaching. And ultimately, I think that made me a better wrestler, considering, you got to do it 1,000 times in your head before you can teach it to somebody else.
Yeah.
So, I think that ultimately made me a better wrestler, a better competitor, because I had to slow down, take the time to teach it, put myself in a good position, and then teach another good position out of it. And so I think that if I was to give a piece of advice to any coach or anybody that planned on coaching or any kids coming up, take time to teach those younger kids, because the person that teaches that position is doing it so many times in their head. I still catch myself. I'm like, hey, I'll call a kid over. Hey, come here. Let me see this real quick. And I'll have to do it a couple of times before I can feel back into, like, hey, let me see this real quick. Boom, give me this position and we'll wrestle that position. And then I'll hit it and I'll be like, okay, that felt right. And then we'll go back and we'll teach it again. But I have to do it a couple of times just to make sure that I'm teaching it correctly.
Yeah.
So if I could give anybody any advice about that, take those older kids and for 2 weeks, stick them with the younger kids, because one, I think it makes the younger kids tougher because the older kids are going to beat on them a little bit. And then two, those older kids, they have to slow down, break it down step by step just to teach it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And not a lot of kids take time to do that. That's why, in my opinion, it's why some really, really great wrestlers wind up not coaching at all.
Yeah.
It's because they never took time to teach anybody else.
Yep. Yeah.
So
and so many times I see this, and tell me if you've seen it or if you agree. You don't have to be you didn't have to be a great wrestler, state champ, a state placer to be an absolutely great coach. So many times, a lot of times, I've seen kids that were average in high school that are some of the best coaches out there that I've seen. Do you see that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I can tell you right now. And I just want to take a second to congratulate Clay Allen, because I'm not about to throw him under the bus, but he'll tell you the same thing.
Florida High?
At Florida High. Clay was not a great wrestler in high school. He'll tell you that. He will. Those are his words, not mine. I've had this conversation before. Okay. So Clay will tell you, I'm not a great wrestler in high school, but I think Clay does a great job with that Florida High program. I think that he has a phenomenal wrestling philosophy and he implements it into his kids. He's not only making them better wrestlers, he's making them better people. And when you do that, those kids wrestle harder. Those kids wrestle tougher.
I tell you what, I didn't even know who Florida High was for the longest time. And, since Clay's been there, I can name a bunch of guys on their team. I mean, he's got some studs, man. Jasper Kroom, who unfortunately didn't get to the state tournament for, I think it was a weight issue or something like that. But that Jasper is one tough son of a bitch, man.
Yeah.
Holy shit. And smart as hell.
Oh, yeah. Smart as a whip. And he, Xander Hawks did a great job. Again, not without bumps in the road during his season, but that kid overcame adversity and wound up wrestling a phenomenal match in the state finals and pinning that, Motter Lakes kid. It was great. That's a culmination of hard work right there. And I think that Clay does a great job. But I just using Clay as an example, there's tens of thousands of coaches
Yeah.
out there that took the time to come back and give back to the sport, and you know, just just helping other coaches, younger coaches, get
Mhm.
back into the sport and teaching them how to motivate kids. And that's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
If you can get a kid to run through a brick wall for you,
That's it.
that they'll do anything, man.
Yeah.
If you
Absolutely.
can motivate them well enough, they'll do anything for you. And that's the biggest takeaway that you can get from coaching is those kids come back and they see you and they're like, Coach, man, thank you for everything. Like I would not have been the person I am had you not taken the time and invested the time in me. And to me, that's
compliment, right?
that's reward enough,
Yeah. That's what it's all about.
Oh
That's
yeah.
what it's all
So
about.
I do. I honestly do think that some mediocre wrestlers become better coaches.
Mhm.
I could see that. I do see that on a daily basis, and I also see that those same coaches, those mediocre wrestlers, have more passion than the kids that were more successful.
I agree.
You know,
Yeah. Yep.
I think I've been seeing this TikTok all over the place, and it's Jordan Burroughs, and he's training his kid in the garage, and the sound overplay is talking about how you have to be obsessed.
Mhm.
Obsession beats talent every time. And I've been
Mhm.
seeing it come across my time feed and things like that. But I think it's true. And I think that some of those coaches that we've been talking about, they're obsessed, and that's
Yeah.
what makes them great.
Absolutely. Agree with you 100% on that. Now, if I were to ask your father who the greatest Suwannee team was, what would he tell? What do you think he would tell me? What team was that?
We have a Facebook page, and it's a Suwannee Wrestling Alumni Facebook page, and we have this debate all the time. And it's, of course, I'm going to say it's my team. It's
Yeah.
my team. My
Yeah.
team. But I think that Dad would politely say, I don't know, that 1996 team was pretty solid.
Yeah.
Or that 1981 team was pretty solid. So,
Swanee's had so many good friggin' teams. The tradition is so rich at Suwannee Live. Let me ask you this. What does it mean? Like, how important is it in Live-O to say, man, I'm a Suwannee wrestler, man? Like, do the kids like have pride with that? It
oh
seems
yeah.
that they really
Oh
do.
yeah. I can tell you, when we left for the state tournament, and I'm pretty sure that they still do this. They bring all the kids out. When we took 8 kids to the state tournament my senior year and was a state runner-up team, and they took all the kids out into the hallway, and we got to walk past when everybody's clapping and cheering, and we're going to the state tournament, and we have an opportunity to win a state title. Now, unfortunately, we lose by like 9 points that year to golf, but they still do that. When we got back, the bank, First Federal Bank, congratulations, Joe
So cool.
McMillan, state champion. Congratulations, on the billboard, the Dairy Queen right across the street, man. The town is just eat up with Suwannee wrestling, and I don't think that it's the success of the program. Obviously, the success of the program has something to do with it, but I think that the town itself, the community itself, buys in to hard work and to each other. They just put so much into each other, and it's that true love your neighbor spirit
Yeah.
that's so important, and that's what builds champions. So, like, as long as they can keep that community alive and keep Suwannee wrestling in that community alive, and it's not just about watching the kids go be successful. You have to be out there, telling them about these kids' stories, and telling people who don't know wrestling. I can remember Dad telling me the story that when he first got there, he knew no one. He just moved in, and people would come to the wrestling matches, and he started meeting people and just inviting them to the wrestling matches, and eventually the bleachers filled. We would have dual meets still, all the way up into 2010, where the gym was slam packed full. I mean, there wasn't a seat in the house, and that's, to me, that culture that you build, especially in those small communities, people remember for forever and ever and ever,
Yeah.
So
There's something to be said about, being raised and growing up in a small town type community. I was always so jealous growing up because, I'm from, I wouldn't say the city, but, I grew up in Coral Springs and then lived in West Palm. And I guess it is a city. Because when I moved, because I graduated from Lincoln, I was at Lincoln my senior year in
Yeah.
Tallahassee. And I tell you what, I loved it so much more at Lincoln than, St. Thomas or any of that. And don't get me wrong, I love being there and it was great. And I love Coach Miller, but it was just different, man. Just so much different. Number one, the people are way different, way
Oh, yeah.
different. Just
Oh, yeah.
nicer, more laid back, a lot slower pace, which I love. But there's just seems like, a small town like Suwannee, just people have pride in the town. They have pride in the athletes. They have pride in the program. I just think that's so awesome, and the kids gotta feed off that. They have to feel like you had to
Oh,
feel
yeah.
like
So
when you're walking through the town, you're probably treated like a god, man.
well, I wouldn't say like a god, but like a celebrity.
Yeah,
Like
that's
if
what I meant. Yeah,
and it's the same with the football team. The football team has been making like the semifinals. We try to keep up. I try to keep up, but they've been making the semifinals. They won 3 state titles as well. Like right around in that '90s era. 80s, '90s era. The same time that the wrestling program was, and athletics were just so rich there. While when I was growing up, and even before, while Dad was there, and it's the culture, man. Like kids want to be good, and they want to be good because they've grown up with such a good support system, and the support system is so important. I don't know if you've been watching the NCAAs, but every kid that All-American that gave those All-American interviews, they're like support system, family, God, team. You know what I'm saying? Like those are the most talked about things in NCAA wrestling. And it's so true because when you have a good support system, you can't go wrong. Like,
right.
and it's more of that tough love support system. It's like, hey man, so what? Get up, do it again, get back on the horse. You know what I mean? And growing up in that type of environment, I wouldn't trade for anything. Because it prepares you for what is to come. Like when I left and went to South Carolina, it was completely different, almost a culture shock because we were if I seen somebody with a flat tire on the side of the road, I'm stopping, at least rolling my window down and going, yo dog, you okay? Like you need some help? Like they still do that. We still do that. I still do that here at the beach town, and people are like, get away from me. I'm like, no problem. See ya.
Get away from me, you weirdo.
Get away from me, you weirdo. It's just people helping people, man. And when you have that kind of heart and soul in your community, when Suwannee has that kind of heart and soul in their community, you watch these athletes be successful because the support system is just so great.
Was it hard for you to move away, or were you ready to move away?
Oh no.
Oh no.
Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything, but I've had to get out. I had to get out, go do my own thing. Make my own name, if so to speak. And try to be successful on my own. Now, lots of mistakes along the way. Look, I am not perfect by any means. I don't claim to be, wouldn't be, but I got out. I did what the best I could do. I learned. I tried to take in everything that I could. Teach myself about other people, teach myself how to treat other people, how to be treated by other people. And that's a growing experience. And I couldn't have the cushion. I'm the type of kid that couldn't have the cushion of, oh, well, let me just fall back on my parents. I didn't want that. I didn't want that. I was the type of kid that I was like, I'm going to strike out. I'm going to do this on my own. And nobody's going to tell me any different, And so I went and I did. And that's how I got involved here at South Walton. Is after my freshman year at Newberry, they're getting ready to send some of us home for the summer, and I had redshirted my freshman year, so I'm getting sent home for the summer. And Dad calls me and he's like, "Hey, listen, I know you're 20 years old. You come back. You're gonna live in my house. You're gonna live by my rules." And I said, "Well, I ain't coming home then." And so. I got a phone call from a guy named Darren Dunwald, who was coaching at South Walton at the time when I was in school. And Darren called me. He says, "Hey man, got this dad, and he watched you wrestle at the state tournament. Really likes your style, likes your your dad and your moral values. I've been telling him all about you. Would you be willing to come meet him? Live here. He'll get you a job. You live here and you coach his kids." And I said, this is in a span of like maybe 2 days. So I'm still fuming. I'm like, I'm not going home, I'm not going home. You can't make me go home. I'll stay here instead of go home. They'll have to kick me out of these dorms. And the phone call came and I was like, yeah, absolutely. What's the address? I just kind of took off and I met Chris Pickering and lived with them every summer and trained Cody, William, and Ethan and those other boys in Back in Black and had a blast and made good friends. And that was kind of the culmination of it.
That's so cool, man. I tell people all the time when they ask me about wrestling, people that don't know wrestling, and I'm like, it's so much more than the wrestling. It's about making those lifelong friendships that, you might be on a all-star, like a Disney dual team with a kid from another school that fucking hated in high school, and you wind up being best friends on that team, right? I mean, it happens all the time, and then you wind up being like really tight with them, and it's really about that. It's those lifelong friendships. It's the lessons that you learn from wrestling, getting your ass kicked, having to, kind of, take a hit at a tournament and get your shit squared away and come back and wrestle back and get hurt. All of that stuff prepares you to be successful in life. I mean, that's just what I think.
And it's a cool experience, for a small town kid like me. We did family vacation in Panama City Beach. You know what I mean? Like, we traveled to Alabama for Christmas, but through wrestling, I got to see 31 different states, man. Like,
that's crazy.
Now, most of it was the inside of a gym, but there were some fun things to do out there. Joe Van Vactor would take us, Joe Van Vactor and Coach Brian, who was at Reigns for the longest time.
Mm-hmm.
They would take us everywhere.
Yeah.
My son Dylan
went with Van Vactor on one of the trips. I don't remember where it was, but he went on one of those trips, and it was the greatest time he ever had.
Yeah, man, I'm telling you. Listen, I have so many memories of so many national tournaments and dual tournaments here and there, and we would just go and hang out and see the towns, and they would take us all kinds of weird places, and it was just awesome. It was awesome. So through wrestling, I got an opportunity to see all of that, and it's just, like I said, it's given a lot to me. So at this point in time, I'm just trying to give a little bit back.
Absolutely. It's getting late. I'm gonna let you go in a second, but real quick, coaching at South Walton, obviously I know you still have love in your heart for Suwannee, but was it hard for you to kind of let a little bit of that go and get that same love for another program, South Walton, that's maybe you wrestled against them when you were in high school, but
yeah, actually it was. And I'll tell you this quick story. So my brother was in between football school and going back to wrestling school, and he wound up wrestling at Marion Military Institute, MMI, there in Alabama, and then moving on to Bacone College in Oklahoma, which is an NAI high school. Yep. So he's going to taking some semester courses at TCC in Tallahassee, and Chuck Ringle calls him and says, "Hey Lee, come on over and help us out over here at Leon." And so Lee calls Dad and he says, yeah, I'm going to wrestling practice. They're chit-chatting, and Dad says, "Wrestling practice? What wrestling room?" He goes, "I'm going over here to Leon." And he says, "You don't be showing them any of our secrets."
He was serious too. He was serious.
Oh, he was dead serious. And so it was funny because I was coming over here to the Panhandle, and I'm like, "Hey Dad, like, and at the time I was going to Niceville, meeting up with a guy by the name of Paul Hartzog. And I was like, "Hey Dad, like, I got this offer to come down to Niceville High School and coach, and do you want to ride?" And he goes, "I'll meet you." So he met me over there. And I actually came through from South Carolina. I was still living up there, picked him up. And he says, now, son, when you get here, we don't tell them our secrets. Okay. We don't do that. And so, it was hard to like let go because, to have super successful teams, gotta tell those secrets. So
Do you ever see any of the South Walton kids? Do any of them remind you of like Suwannee style? I mean, they have to pick it up from you. I mean,
oh yeah, oh yeah. You know, you get so many styles in wrestling and so many different kids doing so many different things, but there's one thing that Suwannee has that not a lot of other schools have, and it was just hard nosed, blood and guts
yeah,
wrestling.
yeah.
And it's
Blue collar
hard
kids, man.
to
Blue
it's
collar
hard
kids.
to emulate that. It's so hard to emulate
You
that.
can't-
Because you know, a lot of that comes from life experience. You know,
Mhm.
like we were mean, just mean. You
Yeah.
know, you stepped in that circle, and in our mind, and in our heart, and in our soul, and every fiber of our being, we thought that you did not deserve to be there,
Mhm.
and we would beat you like you didn't.
I love it. I love it.
That was the way we wrestled, and it was, you know, if we lost, at least you remembered wrestling us, because
Absolutely.
we weren't there to lose. We didn't wrestle like we wanted to lose. We wrestled to win,
For
and
sure.
that was the biggest thing. And it's like I said, don't get me wrong, I love my wrestlers at South Walton, but it's a different experience when you go to Suwannee.
Mhm.
And now my South Walton wrestlers completely different, and they have their own personalities, their own ways to win. They do great. They're working on it, you know, night and day. We've got kids. Hosted an open mat today. Got 8 to 10 kids showing up that didn't have to be there. You know, I'm just like, hey, you know, I'm gonna open the room today. Anybody want to roll? Posted it out in our group chat, and lo and behold, these jokers just start flooding in like doggone rats, man. You can't keep them out of it. So while I will say that there are aspects about Suwannee wrestling that are not emulated, there are aspects about South Walton wrestling that you cannot emulate. And while they may be polar opposites, both of them work. And as my dad would say, there's more than one way to skin a cat.